If you should meet Moses or any of the prophets and you hand them a copy of the Torah or a Tanakh, they will not be able to understand a word of what's written in the book, even though they were the original authors. The reason is because the writing system currently depicted as Hebrew has no relationship with the original Hebrew symbols used in writing of the Torah. It would actually sound like gibberish if you should speak what we call Hebrew today with Moses or any of the ancient Israelites. So, what happened to the original language, and was it ever preserved? The answer will be yes. The ancient Hebrew was preserved. But before we get to that, let's find out what happened back in time that gave birth to what we call modern Hebrew or the modern Hebrew script. Let us journey back to when the Babylonians destroyed ancient Israel. After the fall of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar took a fraction of the people into captivity. Jeremiah puts the number much less than the 10,000 that the book of 2 Kings records. What happened to those taken into captivity will have lasting ramifications, and the writing system that they would develop in Babylon will ultimately give birth to modern Hebrew. However, a particular group amongst those who fled to Egypt when Nebuchadnezzar attacked and further migrated deep into the African continent, West Africa to be specific, retained a dialect of the original ancient Hebrew language, and they still speak it today, as we shall see in this series. Prior to the Babylonian exile, the Torah was written on either leather parchments or papyrus in ancient Hebrew, also known as Paleo-Hebrew. But in exile, the Torah was translated into Aramaic, that is the writing system of Babylon and Assyria, to preserve the text. This was the first time the scriptures was written in symbols, different from what was used by Moses and the prophets, which was pictograph. We know that the Medes and Persians defeated the Babylonians, and they freed the nations held captive in Babylon. The Hebrews then returned back to their homeland after 70 years, speaking Aramaic in addition to Hebrew. They also returned with some of their scriptures written in Aramaic. Example, the book of Daniel, chapters 2 verses 4, where we read the dialogue between Nebuchadnezzar and his sages, to chapter 7 verses 28, is in Aramaic, not Hebrew, but Aramaic. The Medo-Persians kept the Aramaic tongue, and it became the established language in the Levant. Alexander the Great came along and defeated the Medes and Persians, making Greece the new world power, and Greek became the lingua franca of the known world. So in addition to speaking Hebrew and Aramaic, the Hebrews started speaking Greek as well. There came a need for the Torah to be written in Greek, the language everyone understood and spoke. So Ptolemy set out and had the Torah translated into Greek, the birth of the so-cherished Septuagint. This Septuagint will become the hot favorite for the next 300 years. And the popularity of the Septuagint eventually contributed to its downfall. Scribal errors crept in due to the rapid diffusion of the Greek text, causing the content to vary from copy to copy. This alarming situation called for the need to restore the text to its original pristine state. This led to what we know as the Masoretic text. And for some strange reason, the Masoretic text was based on the Aramaic borrowed from Babylon centuries earlier. There is much evidence that the Hebrews returnees still spoke Hebrew in addition to the adopted tongues, Greek and Aramaic, over a century after the Romans destroyed their homeland. Actually, the findings at Qumran also confirms this. So why the leaders fell back on Aramaic is mind-boggling. but they did. What they did is they used the Aramaic writing style, and then they added the 12 vowel points like the commas, the patag, the yirik. These are called nikuds to help with pronunciations since all the alphabets are consonants. This is how the modern Hebrew square script, with its added vowel points, came about. The transliterated version based on the Aramaic style became known as the Masoretic text. It was nearly a period of 2,000 years from the time of going into exile in Babylon to the introduction of modern Hebrew. During this period, the Hebrews had gone through three major language shifts. They had lost the ancient Hebrew. So to differentiate the modern Hebrew from the ancient original, they named the ancient Hebrew Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue, but correctly translated, the only tongue. This Lashon HaKodesh, however, was not lost to the Erhverhs, the Hebrews, who migrated to West Africa. The Erhverhs, the Hebrews, who inhabit what was Everland, now Ghana, Togo, Dahomey, and Nigeria. Of course, not everyone who lives in what used to be Everland, Hebrew land in West Africa, can speak or read the ancient Hebrew script. Most have lost any knowledge of this tongue, but the core group, the Anglo-Erhverhs, the Anglo-Hebrews, which is made up of Judah and Levi, retain and still use Erhverh, Hebrew, in their everyday speech. They will be able to read the original Hebrew script easily, since it's written in their dialect, and they are able to understand the meaning of the pictographs of the ancient Hebrew script, because it's part of their everyday language. The Levites are the Anglo-Erhverhs, who can be found mainly in the Volta region of Ghana. The Judahites live mainly across eastern Ghana and western Nigeria. These two core groups speak different dialects of the ancient Hebrew tongue. I know that most don't know the ancient Hebrew consisted of dialects, which actually varied from tribe to tribe. We have a clear example in the book of Judges. Let me give a context first. There was a civil war between Ephraim and Jephthah, who was from Manasseh. The accusation was that when Jephthah was going to war, he did not call Ephraim to go with them, and the confrontation broke out. Jephthah took it that the Ephraimites came to fight him for not asking them to go to war with him. So he gathered all the men of Gilead and fought the Ephraimites and defeated them. The account is narrated in the book of Judges 12. Read the whole chapter, but I'm going to start from verses 5. The Gileadites held the fords of the Jordan against the Ephraimites. And when any fugitive from Ephraim said, "Let me cross," the men of Gilead would ask him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If he said no, they would say to him, "Then say Shibboleth." But he would say Siboleth, not being able to pronounce it correctly. Thereupon they would seize him and slay him by the fords of the Jordan. 42,000 Ephraimites fell at that time. What we see here is that the people of Gilead took an advantage of an Ephraimite dialect defect to identify who was and who was not from that tribe. Same Hebrew tongue and yet different dialect. The situation is still the same when you find the Levites and the Judahites, Erhverhs, the Hebrews of West Africa, after 2,000 years. From these two groups, we will focus on the dialect of the Anglo-Erhverhs, the Anglo-Hebrews, because they are the Levites and scribes. Their namesake, Anglo, means scribes or writers. Let's look at one example. Let's look at the first alphabet of the Hebrew language. We're going to look at the ancient Hebrew script and then the modern Aramaic script. The Aramaic script calls this letter Aleph, the first letter in the alphabet, The Aramaic script calls this letter Aleph. Aleph does not mean anything. Look at the picture of the ancient Hebrew and you will see the head of a sheep. Now, what is a sheep in the Erhverhs tongue? The Anglo-Erhverhs, the Anglo-Hebrews. What is sheep? Ale. Ale, not Aleph. Look at the second alphabet in modern Hebrew. It's the Beit or Veit. It can be the letter B or V, which can be used interchangeably. The picture of the second letter of the ancient Hebrew is Bavo in the ancient Hebrew script. You see the B and the V, and they sure can be used interchangeably. Bavo. Let's look at the letter Yud. In ancient Hebrew, it shows a man with a hand flared out as a fan, blowing air. What is wind or air in the Erhverhs tongue? Ya. Ya is the correct pronunciation, not Yud. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing the words correctly in the ancient Erhverhs tongue, the Hebrew tongue, because it's not my dialect. What we see is that the modern Hebrew had to invent vowel points so you could read the consonants, but the ancient Hebrew symbols tells you which vowels to use. You don't have to invent anything. We will explain what I mean in part 3 and use the ancient Hebrew scripts to show the correct pronunciation of the tetragrammaton, what we spell in modern Hebrew, Yud, He, Vav, He, and correctly pronounce it. We say the correct pronunciation of that is Yahweh, not Yahweh. And we're going to use the ancient Hebrew script that Moses and the prophets used to prove that the name is Yahweh.